Okay, we're gonna get started. So today's event is Hackpy. This is basically like a series of 3 workshops all on Python. Basically, you're gonna learn how to do Python in this series. So I'll give everyone 1 or 2 minutes to check in if you haven't already. You can scan the QR code or just go on apmucsc.com and just enter that check-in code. Also in the back, there are some stickers if you want to grab some. Google Cloud stickers, free. Okay, so today's agenda is basically we're going to cover basics of Python, which include variables, the data types, the operators, input and output, some libraries, and loops. And at the end, with the remaining time, we can have like a social event with the food and stuff. So, what is Hackpy? Essentially, there will be 3 workshops for this workshop series for Hackpy. So the first one is today, which you're here, are getting started in Python. The next one is going to be next Thursday, same time, same room. And that one will cover like data structures and classes in Python. And the third one is going to be week 5, Thursday, same time, same room. And it's titled Python in Industry and Research. In that, we're going to have a panel of people who are doing research, like we're going to have PhD students, master students, and also we're going to have undergrad and other students who've done internships at companies where they use Python, and they're just going to talk about their experience and stuff. So I really hope you guys come out to that one as well. Okay. So what is Python? So I want everyone to just like talk to those at their table, and if you don't have someone at your table, just go to the one behind you or something and just talk to someone and just share your ideas on what Python is and what you know. Okay, guys, heard some pretty great thoughts. What is Python? Python is a pretty high-level programming language, and a lot of its usage are pretty much a varieties, right? So there's like data science over here. Data science has like math stuff, and Python has specific libraries that you can use for data science, machine learning, computer vision stuff, games, education related stuff as well. Even building websites and networking and databases and stuff. So there are libraries like NumPy and stuff that allow you to use Python into like a wide variety of applications in the real world. So the basics. What do you first learn in your programming language? It's probably something like print hello world, right? So in Python, it's really simple. You just write print, a parentheses, and inside you have the quotes, and you write hello world. And it's gonna print hello world. Exclamation. Any questions on printing? Okay, as you can see, it's pretty simple compared to Java, where you have to make a class and be like system .println and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay, so variables. Variables are, as you know, they store some data, right? And in Python, they're dynamically typed instead of static like Java. Dynamically basically means that you don't really define the variable. Like, you know how in Java or C++ or something, you would have like int or string or something in front of the variable name, like over here, right? So int variable 5 equals 5. In Python, it says the variable name equals 5. You just assign it. So that's going to automatically assume it as an integer. And here are some examples. PID equals the string. You have the quotes, which implies that it's a string, and you have the PID number. Then you write comments with the hashtag, and so this is a comment that this is a string. The next thing is GPA. This could be a float because it's 0.0, right? So GPA is 4.0. As you can see, it's dynamically typed. You didn't identify this as string PID, and you didn't do like float GPA or something. And if you wanted to print the data with the variable, right? So you just do print GPA, and then the console 4.0 would be printed out. Any questions on this? Okay. So what are some data types? Data types are like int, float, strings, and booleans, right? So for int, it's an integer value, basically within the range from -2 to 31 to 2 to the 31 minus 1. Where does that come from? It's basically the bytes there. If you'll take in 20 or something, 20 or something, probably learn bits and bytes and stuff, and you'll see an integer has 32 of them. So that's where the range comes from. Similarly, float also has that same range. And the difference between an int and a float is that a float has like a decimal value to it. So some examples are like 0.5, right? Or -3.0 or something. They're just decimal valued numbers. Then another type is a string. Strings are basically a sequence of characters that can represent any text. So some examples are like hello world, or you can even put numbers into strings, right? Like some address can be a string, right? Some addresses have numbers as well. Or it could just be some simple sentence as well. So that's also a string. And for strings, you put it either in single quotes or double quotes to make sure to let Python know that, oh, this is a string. And booleans, pretty much like all other languages, true or false, or 1 and 0, or on and off or something, right? In Python, you just write true or false. And I think that's kind of self-explanatory. So any questions on any of these data types? Okay. So some operators that we have are comparison operators. The comparison operators can be like equals, right? So like 5 equals 5, right? That would be true. 5 equals 6, that would be false or something, right? It just lets you compare two things using those operators. Like if you can check if they're equal to, not equal to would be exclamation equal to, greater than, just a greater than symbol, or less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and then these are just like examples of what to print. Like if you do 9 equals 10, obviously that's gonna be false because 9 doesn't equal 10. But if you did 9 exclamation equals 10, that would be true, right? Because 9 does not equal 10. And then these are 6 is less than 21, that's true. And 3 is greater than or equal to 3, that's also true. So any questions on the comparison operators? Okay, so another type of operators we have are assignment operators. Assignment operators basically let you assign some value to a variable or something, right? So you can do like num equals 5, right? So that would be assigning the num variable to 5. So that's the equal to. But then you know how in most when you're writing some code in some loop or in some conditions, right? Like you would do, let's say you want to add some value to it. So if your original value of num was 1 and you want to add another 1 to it, you could just do num plus equals 1, right? So that would add the value 1 to it. So then your num will be 2. Similarly, you could also just subtract it. So then you could do num minus equals 1, that would give you 0. And another example, this is just an example of that. And also, one thing to note is if your variable is like string, then you can concatenate them with the plus symbol. Okay. Oh, any questions on the assignment operators, by the way? Okay. The next operator type are arithmetic operators. So you can add, subtract, multiply, divide, or do modulus, right? The typical stuff that you've seen in all other programming languages as well. So some examples include 3 plus 3 is going to give you 6 because they're both integers. But the thing is with strings, if you have the plus sign, that basically concatenates it. Concatenation means it just puts them together. So the example over here, CSE, you have the string CSE, and then you have the plus sign, another string 11. So that's going to put them together, concatenate them. So now you have CSE 11. And there was a space over here. So that's why there is a space over here. If there wasn't a space, but for the first one in 11, then there would be no space between CSE and 11 once you concatenate them. And then this is just division, 5 gives you that. And then just something for Python. If you have 2, we get a whole number, or if you want to round down, we do that one. And the 2 stars are going to be the power operator. So like 2 to the 3rd power, you write it like that. So 2, and then you have the 2 stars, and then the number that would go in the exponent of it, that will give you 8. So 2 to the 3rd is 8. And also one thing to note is unlike Java or C++ and stuff like that, there's no like plus or minus. That is one downside of it. So you do kind of like sometimes have to like write it out. Like now variable equal plus equals that. And so like plus just to automatically increase it. So any questions on the arithmetic operators? No? Okay. Another type we have are the logical operators. The logical are the basics like and, or not. So the and operator is going to return true if both values are true, right? So if, well, let's say I am a female and UCSC student, that's going to be true. That's going to be true. If it was like I am a female and goes to Harvard or something, that's going to be false because I don't. Right, so that's and if both statements are true, then you're gonna get true. If one of them is false, it's gonna be false. And then the OR operator, it's gonna be, if either one of them is true, you're gonna get true. But if both of them are false, you're gonna get false. And the not is basically just the opposite of the original value. So some examples are at the bottom over here. So if 9 equals 10 and 6 is less than 21, well, 9 does not equal 10. So that automatically tells you that's gonna be false because it's an and. But if it was or, 6 is less than 21, that part is true. Even though the first part is false, this is still gonna give you true because it's an or. And lastly, for the not false, if it's not false, that means it's true. It's just the reverse, the opposite of the original value. So any questions on logical operators? Okay. So a quiz time. I guess first you can talk to your neighbors. For the first thing, what would it be printed for? There are 3 questions. So if x equals 3, and then you do x minus equals 2, and then you do x plus plus, and you print x, what would this output? This let's just go over that question first. So discuss with your neighbors. What do you think will be printed in the console? Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll go over it. Does anyone have any ideas on what the answer would be? You can just raise your hand. Yes. Yes, you're right. So there will be a compile error, right? Because as I mentioned, in Python, you can't do plus plus or minus minus. It's invalid. So now let's work on the second one with the people with you. So if you have y equals 9.0, a float value, and then you divide it by 2, what's going to be the value of y?
We should do green power. There's no point in letting it go cold for the next hour. No point in letting it go cold.
Okay.
I think people who are going to stay.
I'll just do it after this. Okay, so anyone have any thoughts on what would be printed? You can just raise your hand and tell me what you think will be printed. Anyone? Yes. Close. Anyone else? Yes. Yes. Why? Yes. So as you can see, y is a float value. So because of that, it's gonna be 4.0. Any questions? Okay, let's do the third one. So z equals not So instead of the not is 3 is less than 2 and true. So the best way to go about this would be to solve the things inside the parentheses and then not that. And what would be printed? Let's talk with everyone first. I'll give it 1 minute. Okay, I think this was pretty simple for most of you, so we'll just go over the answer. Just raise your hand if you have any thoughts. Do you wanna go? Why? Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yes. Okay, does anyone have any questions or was unable to hear? So basically why it's true is because 3 is less than 2 is false, and false ended with true is gonna be false, and not false is true. So any questions on any of these? Okay. So the next one, you have x equals to the string of 11 and y is an int. What would be printed over here if you have x plus the string 1? Yes. 3 ones. Yeah. Why? Yes. So basically the x is a string and you're adding that to another string. That's going to concatenate those two. So you have the 3 ones. Any questions on that? Okay. The next one, x plus 1. Anyone else? Maybe this side in the back. Any thoughts? Okay, yes.
I believe it's an error.
Why?
Find a string so that it's
Yes, correct. So it's gonna give you an error because the x is a string, whereas the 1 over here is an integer. You can't add a string and an integer, so it's a mismatch. And the last one is y equals 11 just an int plus 1. What would that give? Anyone else? Anyone in the back or something? Yes. What? False? Oh, 12. Yeah. So see, it's 11 is an int and you're adding another int. So 11 plus 1 is 12. Any questions on any of these three? Okay. So next, we're going to cover typecasting. So an int will just give you an integer based on whatever value you put inside, right? So let's say you did int, inside the parentheses, you put the string 1. That's going to typecast it into an int. That's going to turn the string 1 to an int 1. And then the float value 2.3 is what is going to return 2 because it just rounds down. So what do you think int 2.6 will return? Anyone? Yes. Why?
just give you the value.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess I didn't put the answer on there, but yeah. Because you're typecasting it into an int, it's just gonna look at the int that over there. And then int or false is and if you learned in CSE 20 or 21, and if you've not taken those classes, basically a 1 will equal true and a 0 is equivalent to a false. So in this case, if you typecast a Boolean value of false into an int, it's going to give you 0. And then other typecasting would basically be kind of work similarly. You have a float, just put in any value you want, and then it will turn that into a float. If you have like an integer 1, right, it will turn that into like 1.0 or something like that. Then string, if you have an integer like 1, 2, 3, it's going to turn that into a string 1, 2, 3. And then a Boolean is, let's say you put 1, that's going to give you true. Any questions on any of typecasting for any of them? Also, if you just have any questions, just raise your hand. Feel free to raise your hand. Okay. So input and output, basically, right here, you're gonna print an argument, right? So let's say this function will print out the arguments to the standard output in the console. So you can have anything inside, you can have strings, integers, booleans, or whatever you want. It's gonna print that out. Then input, this is gonna read the thing from that console. So let's say you printed out, okay, what's your lucky number or something, right? You put that question mark or something, and then it's gonna wait. And in the next line, if you have input, it's gonna wait for someone to respond in the console, like give you an input. I'm gonna take that input and do whatever you want to do with it afterwards. Does that make sense? Okay. But for the input, it returns a string value. It reads everything as strings. So you would have to do typecasting if you want to change that into some other thing. But also one thing to be wary of is some users might not necessarily write something that can be converted into an int. So just code wisely, I guess. Okay, so this is an example. Name equals input, hi, what's your name, right? So whatever you put inside the input is what's gonna be printed in the console. So if you ran that, it's gonna ask, hi, it's gonna say, hi, what's your name? And that's gonna wait for the user to type something in. And then let's say I typed in my name, Kushi, right? Then your name is gonna equal Kushi itself, the string. So when in the next line, if I do print name plus do you like to code, it's gonna print out my name because that's what I inputted. And then it's gonna concatenate this string. So it's gonna be Kushi, do you like to code? Does that part make sense to everyone? Cool. So then next example is basically like enter, you can print Y or no. This is kind of similar to this, except that it just prints it before and then you're asking for the input. It's pretty equivalent to the first thing. And then lastly, it's basically an if-else condition. So like if you entered Y from the top part, right? So in the console, it's gonna be enter Y or no. It's gonna wait for their input. The response could be either Y or no, N, depending on what the user typed. So if you have Y, it's gonna print A, I like to code too. Otherwise, it's gonna print aw, but coding is fun. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So that's like built-in functions. So we can cast data types as you saw with int, float, string, or boolean. And then the Python also has like math functions like absolute values, sum, max, or rounding, and also like boolean stuff like any or all. There's like an official Python documentation. If you just Google Python documentation, you can search up a lot of the built-in functions that you can use. It's just like in any other programming language, right? Like in Java, there's a Java documentation that you look at to do stuff, right? Like let's say you forgot how to append something, you would just look up the documentation to see, oh, I used that word append or something. So any questions on using built-in functions, like how you would search them up? Okay. I can just go through it, but yeah. So there's like a built-in documentation you can just search through if you wanted to see what something does. You can just read through. They usually have some examples as well, and you'll learn how it works. So, okay. Also, I want everyone to be able to get food. So is food ready? Okay, not yet. So next up are library functions. So Python has lots of library functions, right? So there is a standard library, just like that. There are a bunch of stuff that you can do, like they're pretty built in. So you can just go through the documentation, see whatever you want to do. There's a bunch of stuff with arrays, numbers and stuff. A lot of math stuff. That's why it's typically used in like research like ML, CV, and also like data science and stuff. Because it has a lot of functions that are used, very helpful if you want to do some math computation. So, and the thing about Python is you didn't need to import the library. So the way to do that is basically at the top of your code, just write import and then the name of the library. So if you go to the standard library, you can just see, sorry. you can just see which ones, the name of the library that you want to import, and then let's say you wanted to import the random library, then just do import random at the top. And then you just use the functions from that library, like so, like the name of the library dot the function's name, and then whatever parameters typically go into that function. So for example, from the random library, there's that's the name, the random is the library name, then you have the dot, and then you want to use a function randint, which is just going to give you a random integer, and in the parentheses is the range of that. So if you want to give a random integer from either from 0 to 5, any of those numbers. So when you have that, it's going to basically either return 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So that's just just like the basic syntax of how to go to any library and use their functions. Any questions on that? Okay, so we do have some coding exercise for everyone. If you just open up your laptops and go to this website, just type in acmurl.com/hackpy1-rebel. I'll leave this up for a minute so everyone can go to it. Pretty good. That was pretty bad.
Yeah.
That looked pretty bad. Okay. So in that link, basically what you'll find is some exercises that you have to do. So just do all the stuff. There are comments in the code that will help you see what you need to do. And if you have any questions, just raise your hand. I'll walk around and answer any questions you have. So just code all the things, all the to-do stuff until line 29, the first part only, please. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We will walk around and help you out. But yeah, just read the comments of what you need to do. Sorry, I forgot to mention. So one thing you want to do is basically just fork the REPL to be able to type in it. So just click on the button that says fork, and you'll have your own copy, and you'll be able to type in it and run it and stuff. Yeah. Okay, it seems like a good amount of you are actually done. So I'll walk through the code. So first off, we're gonna one of your first tasks was to input the random library. So as you remember from one of the slides, it's just import random. The import and the name of the library, which is random. So import random. Then this was given to you. You have chances equal to 8. Upper bound was set to 100. And one of the things you had to do was use a function call from the random range. So random.range, and your parameters are going to be 0 to the upper bound. The upper bound is already set to 100. So this function answer is basically calling the random range function from the random library. And for that, basically, it's going to have you choose any of the random numbers from 0 or 100. Answer can range from 0 to 100, any random number from those. Then your task was to print a sentence that says make a guess about the number. So just a simple print statement, print, and then that sentence, make a guess about the number. After that, your task was to print the sentence, the number is an integer between 0 and followed by the value of the upper bound. So this is another print statement. You have the first string, which is the number is an integer between 0 and with the space. And then you wanted, what I was asking you is about the string concatenation with a variable. So if you remember, upper bound was integer, so you have to typecast that into a string, right? If you are to concatenate that to a string, right? So upper bound, you typecast that to a string, so that's string upper bound, and then you're gonna add the plus to the first part of the sentence. So the number is an integer between 0 and plus, so concatenate that sentence with the string of an upper bound, which is gonna be 100. So it's gonna print the number is an integer between 0 and 100. Your next thing was to initialize response with the user's input. So the variable response equals the input. And then you wanted to store that value from guess. So guess is stored as an int type. You want to typecast that because the user, whatever input is going to be a string value. So you're going to typecast that to an integer. So int and response. Response was your input. So any questions of what you were supposed to do for the first part? So this all makes sense to everyone. Okay, cool. Now we're going to go into conditionals. So conditionals are basically your regular if, else if, or else statements. So if statements are basically if you have something inside, it's going to execute the current statement if it's satisfied. So an example, x is initially defined to 7, and if x is greater than 10, you want to print x is greater than 10. Well, I see x is 7, so it's not going to go into that if statement. So it's going to go into this elif statement. Elifs are basically like if was false, like if you didn't go into the if statement, then check this one. Is 7 greater than 8? No. So you're gonna move on to the next one, is which is also an else statement. So if the previous one failed, the previous if or else if failed, if they were not satisfied. But if the current one is satisfied, so 7 is greater than 6, that's true. So you're gonna print out x is between 6 and 8. And then else is if it was less than 6, right? Like let's say it was 4 or something, then it's gonna go into the else. And else basically means anything about like all the if and all the else if statements were not satisfied, then you go inside that else. So does that make sense to everyone? Any question on conditionals? Okay, so and one thing to note, if you see in Python, everything is indentation based. So when you were coding, right? If you weren't indented properly, it would not go in. So in this if statement, if the print was outside, if it wasn't indented properly inside, then if that's not what would execute inside that if statement. It would be a whole sentence. So if print was outside, if indented with the same line as the if right here, then it would just print it anyways. It would go. It wouldn't matter if the if was satisfied or not. So Python is very indentation based instead of Java, where you have the curly braces, or C++ and stuff too. Any questions on that? Okay. So loops. So the typical loop. So first of all, we have a for loop. For loops are basically, you have something that you want to iterate over. Let's say it's a list or something. You want to go over that list. So you can, one way to go through that list is using a for loop. So for example, for index in range 10. So this, instead of in Java, you have like 4 and then I equals 0, the starting value, and then you're gonna have your condition and I plus plus, right, to increment it, or I minus to decrease it or something. Instead of that, you have in Python, it's for index in range 10. So if you have like 10 elements in a list and you're gonna loop through all those 10 elements, you're gonna write for index in range 10 and then do whatever you want with those. So you just print index for that. So is that clear? Okay, then this one is basically, it's gonna step through. The last one is how much you want to step through it. So you have 1 through 10, you have 10 elements, but you want to go to 1, 3, 5 and stuff. You want to go increment, you want to skip 1 kind of thing. And then similarly for the last one, it's just the last parameter is just how much you want to step by in the list. And then you have the while loops. While loops are basically while it's true, essentially. And instead of for loop, you have like a fixed number of elements, like you know how many elements are in your list. But in while loops, you may not necessarily know how many things there are. You just want to break out of it if there is some certain condition that's satisfied. So for example, I equals 0, then while I is less than 10, you want to print I and then increase I by 1. So first of all, you have 0, you print 0 is less than 10, so you're gonna go inside the while loop, so print 0 and then add 1. So now I is 1, it's still less than 10, so you print 1, then add 1 to it. So just like that, you're gonna keep on going and printing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So is that example clear to everyone? Okay. And kind of similarly, you have this list. The line function is basically the size of list. So in this case, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. So while the length I is less than the length of the list, then you're gonna print out the list at that index. So I is gonna be 0 first, right? So you have 0 less than 5, so you print out the value inside the list at the 0th index. That's gonna be 3, and then you increase the index to 1, so then it's gonna be 1, and list index 1 is 4, so you print 4, and so on. Any questions? Okay. So can anyone tell me the problem with this code? I is set to 10, and then while I is less than 25, you're gonna print I. What's the problem with this code? Just raise your hand. Yes. Yeah. So exactly. So the answer was I is never updated. That's the problem with the code, right? This is always just gonna be true. It's never changed. I is just 10. So it's gonna be like an infinite loop, and infinite loops are never good, as you probably know. So, any questions on while loops? Okay, then control flows. Control flows are basically like a break or continue. So break, you stops executing the current iteration and skips all the remaining ones. Whereas continue is just you skip that one, but you move on to the next iteration of it. So some example over here, right? So in the for loop, you have some condition and you write break. That means it's gonna get out of that entire for loop and go to anything that's below your for loop, like any code that's below your for loop code. And whereas continue would basically mean if condition was satisfied and you continue, then you just skip that iteration, you just skip anything that's below that if condition, but that's inside the for loop. You skip that code and just go on to the next iteration. But you don't go exit out of the for loop. And in while, similarly, break, you exit out of the whole while loop and just do the code that's below the while loop. Whereas continue, you just skip that iteration. So any code that's below that can continue statement, but that's still in the while loop, you skip that and go back to the next iteration in the while loop. So is everyone clear on the difference between break and continue? If you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I assume everyone's good. So based on what you just learned about loops, what do you think this will output? You can talk to people in QTL first. Okay, anyone have any ideas? What would this print? Just raise your hand. Even if you think you're wrong, just, yeah. Yes.
So I think it's gonna be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and that's where it stops.
Why?
Because the 10 is the endpoint, and I think 10 is exclusive, so it won't come to the 10.
Yeah, so let's just run it. So obviously, as you said, it's gonna print 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. So if you remember, the first thing is also always included. 10 is your last value. So all the numbers from 0 to 10, that's your range. And the last parameter is the step. You want to step in that list by 2. So you're increasing by 2, right? So 0, then the next one is gonna be 2, because you're stepping by 2. The next one is 4, that's 6, and then 8. 10 is not included in the list because it's the last number. But if it was 11, then 10 would be printed. So is everyone clear on this example? Okay, cool. So similarly, what about this code? Just raise your hand if you think you know the answer. Yes.
10, 8, then 6, 5, 4, 2. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So let's run it. So as you can see, it's 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. So why? So originally it's 10. So 10 is not equal to 0. So you enter the while loop. Then you mod that by 2. It does equal 0 because there's no remainder. Modulus is basically tells you what the remainder. So the 10 mod 2 is 0. So you enter this. So you print out y. Y is 10. Then you go here and now 10 minus 1 is 9. So now y is 9. Y does not equal 0. Then mod that by 2. It does not equal 0. So you go to line 5. So now y is 8. Then you keep going. So similarly, basically, this modulus makes it only print out the even numbers. Any questions on this code? Okay, cool. And then this one. You can talk to those at your table too. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, you can go ahead. Oh, why?
Because first of all, 9 would give a remainder of 1 is 2, so it's 9.
Mhm.
Then it'll be 8, it was 1 would be 8. And then now, if the remainder is 0, divided by 2, can replace that, it's done.
Yes. So once you run it, it is 9. Why? So let's walk through the code. So y is initialized to 9. So while true, obviously it's true. So y mod 2, that's not 0. That's gonna give you 1. Right. So you go to the next one, line 5. If y equals 8, that's also not true. 9 does not equal 8. So now you go to line 7. You print out y, which is gonna print out 9. So it's printed 9. Now y. So 9 minus 1, so y equals 8 now. So now you go back up, 8 mod 2 equals 0, you break out of the loop. And since you broke out of the loop, there's nothing else, and that's it. Any questions? Okay, cool. Now I'll give it over to Nitya to wrap up the workshop. There's just a little more left to the event. Yeah. You want to give this?
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Okay. So we're gonna start the second part of the code exercise. So basically, we're just gonna go to the same link that we were on before. And we're gonna go to show files, and then we're gonna scroll down to line 30, which is gonna say that's where the second part starts. So in main.py, if you scroll down, yeah, right here, this is where the second part of the code exercise starts. So you can just get started on that, kind of similar structure to the last time. So just go through and then answer all the to-dos and write your code in there. And then we'll walk around if you have any questions.
The game is like those. Like some point, I don't know, I don't think anyone's gonna do that. Someone else. Like the spirit of one. Whatever it is, I say. It's like it's been like it's like but it seems like they're getting all this. But like someone else did editors that allow you to edit anyone. And there's so all this, but it's yeah, exactly. This is
If any of you want, I can get some extra food, there's still lots of them.
Guys, does anyone wants to exclude that? Trying to pull it up to. Yeah. Well,
Okay, so now we're gonna start going over the solutions to the coding exercise. So we're gonna start going over the solutions to the coding exercise right now. So I'm just gonna go through them really quickly. So first we're gonna import the random library, and then so we just have import random. Then we want. Oh. So we want the program to repeat until the guess is equal to the answer. So in order to do this, we're going to use a while loop. So we have while the guess is not equal to the answer, and then we're going to want to decrease the number of remaining guesses each time that we go through the while loop. So we have chances minus equal 1, and that's going to decrease the chances each time we start the while loop. And then we also want to check if they have any more chances left. So we add an if statement right here to check if chances equal 0. And then if that's true, then we're going to print a message that they ran out of chances. And then we're also going to break out of the loop so the game finishes. So then we also have some if statements to help the user when they're trying to guess. So here we're checking whether their guess is less than the actual answer, and then we're printing a message accordingly, and we're also printing what their guess was. And then kind of a similar thing, we're just going to be prompting them to guess again. And then right here, if their guess is greater than the answer, then we're going to print something according to that. So tell them that their answer is smaller, and then print their guess, and then once again, prompt them to guess again. And then we want to update their guess. And then this is basically the entire body of that while loop. And then if they're able to guess in the number of chances that they have, then we print a final message, and then we tell them the answers. So I'm just going to demo it really quickly to show kind of how it's going to work. Okay, so it's an integer between 0 and 100. So we guess 50. So it says that the answer is bigger than 50. So then let's try guessing 75. Answer is smaller than 75. Smaller than 60. Smaller than 55. Okay. Well then. Okay, so we guessed it in just the right amount of chances. So that's basically how the program should work. So as you can see, since we use a while loop, it just keeps prompting the user for a new input until they run out of chances. And the number of chances is kind of what's going to cause us to break out of the while loop. And that's really important because if we don't decrement the number of chances, then we'll get stuck in an infinite loop. So that's the coding exercise. And then I'm just gonna go over a few more kind of interesting things that you can do with Python. Okay, so we kind of went over if-else statements and how to use them, but Python has something called ternary operators, and basically what this does is it allows you to condense a multi-line if-else statement into a single line, and it just makes things more concise and easy to follow. So as you can see on the left, we're just initializing the variable num to string 5, and then checking if num is 5, then we're going to set x to 5, and then otherwise we're going to set x to 0. But we can actually do this in a much simpler and more concise way using ternary operators. So here we still set number to 5, but then instead of writing out that entire if-else statement, we just have it in one line. So we have a condition in the middle, number equals 5, and that's kind of what we're going to check. And then we have the two outcomes at the start and the end. So if number equals 5 is true, then we're going to set x to 5. But if that's condition returns false, then we're going to set x to 0. And here's just kind of like the basic syntax of ternary operators. So first we have the on true, and that's basically whatever statement is going to execute if the condition returns true. And then we have the condition, which is whatever we're checking. And then on false, whatever statement is going to execute if the condition is false. So that kind of corresponds to the example that I just went over. Yeah, but one thing that we want to note is that ternary operators are usually best to use when you just have two outcomes. Otherwise, it can get a little bit complicated. As you can see here, we have like multiple conditions and multiple outcomes, so it's probably not the most efficient way to do things. So it's best if you only have two possible outcomes for you. So. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about something called list comprehension. So this is kind of a similar concept to ternary operators in that it helps us consolidate a little bit more of the lengthy process. So on the left, we have a for loop, which we talked about earlier in the event. So we're initializing an array nums with those values, and then we also initialize an empty array called num squared. So basically, we want to take all the values in nums and then create a new list that has those values squared. So on the left, you can see kind of just a more traditional way of doing this, which is just using a for loop. So we iterate through all the elements in nums, and then we square them, and then append them to the new empty array, and we print it out again. But we can actually do this in a pretty short way. So on the right side, we're using list comprehension. So basically, we're still going to define nums the same way, but then instead of writing out the whole for loop, we're just going to write it in a single line like this. So as you can see, we have num squared, which is going to be our new list that we're creating, equals, and then I squared. So that's whatever operation that we want to perform on every item that we're putting into the new list. And then we have like the iteration to put all the items into the new list. And then we print out the new list. And then as for the actual syntax of it, so we have expression for item and list of conditionals. So basically the expression is whatever operation that we want to perform on every single item that we're putting into the list. And then the middle section of the syntax is basically just iterating to put all those items into the list. And then the conditional kind of acts like a filter. So it only accepts items into the new list if they return true to that condition. So we didn't go over that in the last example, but here's like an example in the conditional. So we have the conditional in this case would be if I want to is equal to 1. So it would only accept elements into the new list if that returns true. And then it would also add 0.5 to all those elements to make this new list. So yeah, that's basically all we have for you today, but next week we have another workshop, same day, same time, same room. We're going to be going over data structures, functions, and classes.
Yeah, so basically, that's all for today's workshop, but so come out to the next one. You're gonna learn about data structures, classes and functions in the next one, same room. Same time, Friday, next Thursday. I hope you all have meeting. Also, a plus two Nathan Love as workshop, which is happening next week Tuesday from 5 to 7 or 5 to 7 in VIB, which is at the fire station. It's all on back end, remember that too. Thank you for coming.
So you just said, that part of the API event, right? So it should be the API website, okay?
All our roads are on our Discord and you can use that on that calendar.
What?
Yeah.